Okay, everybody, without further ado, over to our main event. So I'm going to hand over now to our very special guest speaker this evening, Sean Ronayne. Sean is a birder since childhood, really enthusiastic about nature, and he actually works as a professional ornithologist now as well. And he has a deep interest. He was telling me, some people would say an unhealthy obsession, but we'll go with deep interest in bird sounds and bird sound recording, which is what he's going to be talking to us about this evening. And he's the founder of Irish Wildlife Sounds, which he'll be telling us a bit about as well. So without further ado, Sean, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Niall. Okay. So thanks for coming along. I'm really looking forward to sharing this story with you. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background first, just so you know what's ahead. So basically, this is going to be about my sound recording journey beginning in 2018, and it's going to bring us right up to the present. So I'm going to cover lots of different aspects. So my own learning side of things, my own personal highlights, and I'm going to dip into the mysterious world of NOCMIG as well. So NOCMIG is short for nocturnal migration. And finally, I'm going to finish off and look at some of the current Irish projects that are ongoing right now. So before I begin, I'd like to say thank you to all of the different collaborators and sponsors that have joined me along the way, because without them, it really wouldn't have been possible. So thanks very much. Okay, so I'm going to start in the very beginning, and it might come as a surprise to you to learn that we're going to start out in Catalunya. So Catalunya is the northeast of Spain, and I was living there for some time, for about 2 years approximately. And this is basically where everything began. So what I did is I started out with a very simple recorder. So this is what you can see here, and it's the Olympus LS12. So this was a very cheap recorder. It cost me, I think it was about €80 at the time. And the reason I got this is because I was in a new country and there were lots of unfamiliar sounds. And I really wanted to do my best to try to get up to speed and learn these new sounds and possibly document them for further listening as I went along. So this is the beginning. And what I would do is I would walk in my local park and just basically practice and record common bird sounds. So one piece of advice I need to give you before we proceed is that some of my earlier recordings are quite faint. So I'd advise you to make sure that you're in an area where there's not a lot of loud background noise, and just make sure that your volume is up relatively high. When I do move on to the later recordings and the volume and the gain from my own audio files are a bit higher, I'm going to warn you because you might want to turn it down at that point. So for now, keep it up to the max. So this is a robin, a very common species, even in Catalonia, especially in winter. And this was recorded in my local park. This recording isn't going to be very loud, and it's essentially because I was at the very beginning of my journey and I didn't really know what I was doing. So what you'll find there is that there's a lot of wind noise, or you might not be able to hear it. There's two reasons for this. I didn't have the settings set up correctly, and I was missing this. So this is a dead cat. It's essentially a wind stopper. So if I had put that over the top and I'd set the gain a little bit higher, this recording would have sounded a lot nicer. But it was the early stages, so no problem. So what actually ended up happening was I continued like this for several months, and I ended up getting quite frustrated because I didn't have the time or the patience to learn these new techniques and improve everything. So this little recorder here ended up sitting in my wardrobe for several months until this. So what you're looking at here, this is the Delta Birding Festival. So this is located in the Ebro Delta, which is in the very south of Catalonia, and it's an absolutely amazing place for bird migration. I suppose it's akin to Tecumseh or Ladies Island Lake, but on a much larger scale. So the birds that move through here are incredibly diverse, and there's seriously impressive numbers pass through. So every year they hold this birding festival, and they have various tents with different products, Swarovski, telescopes, binoculars, and really interesting guest speakers. So what caught my eye for this particular festival year was a guest speaker by the name of Magnus Robb. Some of you may already know who Magnus Robb is. Some of you may not. So this is Magnus here in action at the Delta Birding Festival. So Magnus is part of the Sound Approach team, and they've essentially become pioneers of European sound recording, and their work is absolutely fascinating. And one of the most interesting aspects of their work, and something that really appealed to me, was this aspect of recording nocturnal migrants. So essentially birds that are flying over any given location at night with an autonomous recorder. So what he was telling us was that even in his small little back garden in coastal Portugal, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of birds passing over at nighttime. And afterwards, I had a little chat with him, and I asked him if he thought it would be worthwhile for me to try this over my own balcony in suburban Barcelona. And he told me, yes, absolutely. So I wasted no time. So at the time, this is where I lived, really not a bird haven. I didn't really see very many species from my apartment. So on a given day, when I would look out the limited window space, I would see typically yellow-legged gull, which sounds like this. And this little guy here, which is a monk parakeet, a non-native species, but a nice colorful addition nonetheless. And they're really quite noisy. And they sound like this. Okay. So 1 second there, because I see in the comments that some people are having trouble seeing me. Is everything okay, Niall?
No, we can see you all right. It's just, so I think some people would like to, if you could put your own camera on. It came on there briefly. Okay. We can see your screen fine. No worries there.
I just like to keep the camera off because I'm worried about my internet connections in case it causes a lag. So
sure.
Okay. Is the sound okay?
It's perfect for me, certainly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So I'll continue. So yeah, essentially these two species were very much dominant. So there wasn't a lot of diversity, and my own balcony wasn't a place I went to do some birding. I would go for a walk, in the outskirts of the city, or go to one of the local estuaries. So I was open to the idea of exploring and seeing what was flying over at nighttime. So this is the balcony here. It's really just a small airspace to step out and get a breath of fresh air. So what you can see here is a high-rise series of apartments, and there's also another roof over my own head. So there's not a lot of space there. So the next challenge I had was trying to figure out how I can record without, first of all, the recorder being affected by wind noise, and second of all, rain. I know it's in Barcelona, but it did actually rain occasionally at nighttime there, particularly in the autumn. So this was my little MacGyver contraption here. My trusty Olympus LS12, I had to dust it off and stick it in this measuring jug with a little bit of cling film and an elastic band. So thankfully, it did rain and everything was okay in the morning. So what I did is I took the recorder in, I plugged it into the computer, I uploaded the sound file, and I edited this in some free software. I'm going to explain this whole process a little bit better later on in the presentation, but for now, I'm going to move forward. So to my surprise, this is what I heard. So this isn't a yellow-legged gull, and it isn't a monk parakeet, and it's recorded at about 2 o'clock in the morning. So does anyone have any idea what species this might be? So you can either put up your hand or leave a comment.
And you don't want to give it a go? So, so there's a few guesses there. I see that grey heron has been guessed, and scops owl is another guess.
Yeah, so there's some good guesses for sure. Scops owl, unfortunately, didn't occur in that area. I would have loved it, but no. But grey heron is getting quite close.
Stephen McAvoy is the closest so far. John C. wonders if it's night heron. Gustavo wonders purple heron.
It is night heron, yeah. So it was quite apt that my first knock-mix species was night heron. So yeah, it turned out, in fact, that this species was actually moving in substantial numbers at nighttime, and I never knew this before, despite living there for at least a year at this point. And I would walk the streets at night with my dog, and I never noticed it or never heard it before. So from this point on, I realized that this could work. So I started recording every single night with this little contraption. So here are a few examples of what happened next. Now, these next 6 recordings are still quite faint, and these are the last faint recordings. So I advise you to keep your volume up for these ones. Okay, so let's start with this guy here. So I'll play that one more time and see if you can figure out what it is. Anyone care to guess? So this was actually
a couple of guesses
species. Yeah.
So Siobhan is guessing Tawniel. Stephen McAvoy is guessing brambling.
Yeah, it is. It is brambling. Yep. So this was really a species that, well, it absolutely was not on my radar. I'm in the suburbs of Barcelona. There's not a lot of birds besides the 2 species I described before, and to get this northern finch flying over my apartment was just amazing to me. So it was really starting to get exciting at this point, and these things just kept on coming. Next up, I had this tree pipit. So tree pipit is a species which is a fairly common breeder, but it's also a very common passage migrant. I just didn't realize the numbers that were going over at nighttime. Sometimes, I could get maybe 50, 60 birds in a night. So after a while, things started to die down. The winter thrushes started to appear. So the likes of their song thrush is the default migrant thrush, with the occasional redwing. I wasn't really expecting much. And then late October, the following morning, I was checking my recordings and I heard this. This might be familiar to some of you, but if not, don't worry, I'll explain. So just to put a little context into this, there were very strong easterly winds that night. And it was about, I would say, 20 to 11 when this bird flew over. There was a small break in the rain and it sounded like it was coming down to land. Does anybody know what this one is?
Victor's gone for yellow-browed warbler.
Yeah, it is. It's a yellow-browed warbler. So this totally blew my mind, because yellow-browed warbler, as some of you already know, is actually a Siberian vagrant. It's one of our more regular vagrants, especially in Ireland and in the east coast of Spain, around Barcelona too. But to have one flying over my apartment like that at 20 to 11 at night was just really amazing to me. And I think it was at this point that I really started to develop my obsession with recording birds. So apart from birds, it wasn't just these that I was hearing at nighttime. I also heard some unusual sounds coming from my nocturnal neighbors, such as this. So yeah, there was never a dull moment. And I soon realized that it seems like people never really slept on my street. So,
sorry, Sean, we just have a request there from John. He's wondering if you could play the tree pipit again, please. Sorry.
Absolutely, yeah. So this isn't the best recording of a tree pipit. I'm just using it to illustrate, but it's quite a buzzy high call, I suppose. It registers at about 6 to 7K usually. So that's the closest point of that bird. Is that okay?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So from here, I was truly really hooked. So it was time to invest in some equipment. I knew that this was something that I was really going to enjoy. So I was willing to spend some money. I did some research. What I wanted was a parabola. So what a parabola does is it amplifies the sound very greatly. And the dish here helps to focus the sound as well. So if there's any unwanted sound, like under this area of the dish here, it'll really block it out. So this was great. What this did is it increased the volume of the sounds I was getting. So you might want to turn your own volume down a touch now if you were struggling with the previous ones. And it also really kind of pulled out the bird sounds with a punch. With this, it gave me a little bit of extra reach. So I was getting birds a little bit higher up, and the birds that were lower down were much, much clearer. So what happened next was just amazing. One of the first interesting species in the autumn was this ring ouzel. So as you can probably see, or you may already know, that this is a close relative of the blackbird. So it's like a mountain blackbird. And in Catalonia, if you want to see this species, you have to go high up into the Pyrenees or the pre-Pyrenees. So you have to do a little bit of work to get to see them. So to have this flying over my apartment in Barcelona again was just, it seemed wrong. So this is the ring ouzel. I was really excited about this one, but in fact, they became quite common. The next one was this exotic looking cuckoo. It's not our own regular common cuckoo. This is actually a great spotted cuckoo. So this one sounds almost confusingly like a black-headed gull, but it's not. Usually they have a little rattle at the end of their wails, but this one doesn't incorporate that. But you can still tell it apart from the fact that it isn't as, I suppose, modulated as a black-headed gull. So at this point, I had never seen great spotted cuckoo in Catalonia, so this was a little bit of a strange sensation. I hadn't heard one either, really. I only recorded this bird. So this is part of the strange world of Knockmig. Again, it's just all about context. Listen to these flamingos flying over this urban habitat. You can clearly hear the suburban sounds of passing traffic, a barking dog. And then you have this little group of flamingos coming closer and closer to the point where you hear the wing beats as it passes over my balcony. So yeah, it didn't end there either. Such strange, unexpected events kept happening. So this is a European bee-eater. Okay, it's quite a common species, and admittedly, I did see this species on migration, even in the center of Barcelona or the suburbs of Barcelona. What's unusual about this is this species is typically associated with migrating during the daytime. But Knockmig soon taught me that there are so many exceptions to these rules when you really start listening. And this was a flock of birds. In fact, I had several flocks that night. some taking maybe 15 minutes to pass the microphone. So you're talking, pretty vast scale of migration at about 2 or 3 in the morning. If you listen closely, you'll even hear bats calling at the same time, just to give it a little bit of nocturnal context. So you can hear one of the local buses passing there at nighttime. And I don't know if you picked up the bats, but they're there too. So yeah, this particular group took about, I think, 5 minutes to pass. So it's very difficult to guess how many birds are involved here, but there's probably several hundred really. So it's quite amazing. Another one here, little bittern. So it's similar to bittern in a sense, especially in this plumage, but they're much smaller. And just like bittern, they're very secretive, very elusive. And I hadn't yet seen one in Catalunya, but they were flying over my apartment at night. Quite a subtle call. So I was really, truly fascinated and really in love with this subject now. And it just kept giving up surprise after surprise. And I just want to show you quickly one last file here. So this is just around the corner from my apartment. You can see Montjuic here, one of the famous monuments of Barcelona. And this is just really impressive to me, just the volume of birds that are migrating here in one little audio clip. So what you're going to hear is several song thrushes, like I suppose a high zit call. And then shortly after, you can hear ringoozle. So yeah, it's a high volume of birds. And on nights like that, often it was a call every 2 seconds, or sometimes several calls every 2 seconds, and it was just nonstop. So you're really looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of birds on peak passage here. Another quick example here is a mixed flock of herons. So you've got night heron, grey heron, and little bittern mixed in here at different points. This is grey heron. Song thrushes there again. Grey heron coming closer. The first night herons are just starting in the distance. You'll hear them approaching now. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit just to bring them a little bit closer to us. Okay, night heron. This croaky call is a night heron. Wing beats, probably from a song thrush, zipping past the microphone. So there you have it. This is how it all began. So this was Knockmig. And I eventually started to wonder, what can I learn and what can I do by the daytime? So I decided I was going to record like a madman. So essentially I was going to, every opportunity I had, I planned to go out and record birds by day and just build up a collection. So I set a challenge from the 1st of January 2020 to record as many species as possible in a single year in Catalunya. So to do this, I was going to have to visit a multitude of habitats. So you had the Pyrenees, the likes of the Ebro Delta, the steppes, the dry steppes. So Catalunya really has everything. So I also had several big targets. So these are species that are rare, elusive, really difficult to find. And they were my main goals. Some of these include eagle owl, DuPont's lark, and wallcreeper. So I'm going to give you two examples of these before we move on to the Irish section of the story. We're going to start with eagle owl. Eagle owl is a truly iconic bird. It's one of the biggest owls in the world. We're talking about a wingspan of 5 feet or more, a weight of 1.6 to 4 kilograms, which is really impressive if you consider the fact that these are birds with hollow bones. And they have a really, really distinctive deep hoot, which is far carrying. So the thing about this bird, it's not particularly common. It's not in huge densities in Catalunya. It's obviously nocturnal, and you find it in really difficult to access sites. So this was the first challenge, and I started immediately on the 1st of January. So with this species, along with many other of the difficult species, location is key. And what you need to find for eagle owl is a quarry, and not just any quarry. They look for specific quarries because they use them as, I suppose, like a resonating theater almost, where they bounce their vocals off walls. And if it isn't suitable, they move on and they won't use it. So I tried this quarry right here, which was in a place called Garraf Natural Park. So if you ever visit Barcelona and you want to see something a little bit different, you can drive here in about 15 minutes. So it's a really good location. So what I did is I searched around looking for visible clues while it was still bright. And almost straight away, I found this giant pellet. So a pellet is essentially regurgitated indigestible material. So you've got the hair and different bones, and you might have a skull in there. But this was a particularly large pellet, about the size of my index finger. So I pretty much knew straight away I was in a good spot. So what I did is I had to wait and be patient and try not to make noise with my parabola in hand ready to go. And as darkness fell, nothing really happened, and I kind of lost patience. And just as I was about to go away, this happened. So I panicked. I only got one call. I didn't know where it was coming from, and it felt like a little bit of an anticlimax, to be honest with you. So I decided that this wasn't done. So I'm quite fussy with the recordings that I seek, and what I decided to do was look for something with a little bit more vocabulary, not just the single hoot. I wanted something a little bit different. So I needed to think outside the box. And luckily there's various WhatsApp groups over there, just like we have here. And I started talking to some locals. And this very friendly man here, Xavier Riera, offered to let me stay in his house for the night. And he was going to bring me to his local quarry where there's a pair of eagle owls, which were apparently extremely vocal. And it was quite an accessible site. So that's what I did. He brought me there while it was still bright. And amazingly, even with them being such a big bird, it's very, very difficult to see them. So we didn't see them anywhere. So I set up the parabola and I pointed it roughly in the center of the quarry, hoping for the best, hoping that I was pointed in the right directions. Because you have to remember that these parabolas are very directional. So if you're slightly left or right of the sound, it softens the sound, and it doesn't give it the same kick. So I left it there for the night and hope for the best. I wasn't sure. I didn't know what was going to happen. The next morning, I collected my recorder. It was safe. It wasn't stolen. It wasn't kicked over by anything. It was all good. I uploaded the files, and immediately this is what I heard. So there was an absolute wall of sound after this that went on several hours all throughout the night. And what you're hearing here is first a croaky sounding female followed by a deep hoot of a male. So these are two birds duetting. And what happened next was even more unexpected. So what you're actually hearing there is copulation. So I couldn't believe what I was after was a range of vocabulary, and that's what I got. So this really gave me the confidence to push forward with this little project that I had in mind. And my first big target was under the belt. And I next moved on to this, what I call the wallcreeper saga. So it's called the wallcreeper saga for good reason. This was by far my most difficult target species, and there's a number of reasons for this. So this bird is the ultimate prize. Why? Because it's an absolutely unique and stunning species. So this looks like a red, black, white, and gray butterfly. And what it does is it feeds on sheer cliff faces, often several thousand meters high. So you find them up in the very tops of the Pyrenees. You get them up in the tops of the Alps. You have them up towards the Himalayas. So they're really a high altitude species. So, you know, the terrain that comes with that makes it such a difficult species, and it's also really not common. So on top of that, one of the other points that I found attractive was the fact that there were absolutely no Catalan or Spanish recordings of this species, nothing at all. And on Xenocanto, which is the online database for bird sounds in Europe and the world, really, there were only 35 recordings from around the world uploaded. So this was to become my arch nemesis, and this is what happened. Right, the game plan. If I was going to get this bird, if I was going to sound record or even see this bird, I'd never seen one before in my life. Winter was going to be the time to do this. Why? Because in the winter, the tops of the Pyrenees become extremely hostile and inhabitable. So the birds have no choice but to move down to lower grounds. So what they do when they move down to lower grounds is they try to find habitats that mimic their Pyrenean counterparts. So what they end up doing is they look for bridges, big tall bridges, dams, monasteries, castles, and lowland cliffs. So anything that represents their upland habitat, but in a lower altitude where they're not going to be affected by the snow and the cold. So my first stop was this place. So this is Montserrat. Again, if you're visiting Barcelona, this is very much accessible. So you can get a train and a little tram line that brings you up here. It's not really high. You can walk it in about a few hours. So I spent the day here looking for wallcreeper, wondering if they existed. And I was there for the whole day and I saw nothing. So my journey continued. It was okay. It was early in the winter. And next, I ended up in this place called Tavertet, which is really a stunning, dramatic looking place. In the beginning, I had high hopes, but again, as time went on, I started to realize that this really isn't going to be an easy species to connect with. But there's always a nice bird or two to sound record, and I found the atmosphere here absolutely beautiful. So unfortunately, no wallcreeper for me that day. I spent most of my day scanning cliff faces like this, several hours in fact. And I often came across birds like this, and as the area was so vast, sometimes the scale was a little bit confusing and I would take a double take. And in this instance, this was actually a griffon vulture, so far too big for the wallcreeper I was looking for. Over the coming weeks, I continued and I went to the foothills of the Pyrenees. This particular cliff face had a singing wallcreeper days previously, so I couldn't wait for the weekend to come. I rushed here, spent maybe 3-4 hours here, and it was gone, long gone. I don't know where, but it wasn't here. I spent a lot of my time looking upwards like this, and often I'd come home with quite a crick on my neck. But as always, there was always something to brighten up my day, like this beautiful crossbill in song. So this species often sings in winter. In fact, it typically sings in winter because they're early breeders, and the same is true here in Ireland. So this is a song you can listen out for yourselves. So the journey continues. Also, when I was in these places, I found that, you know, it wasn't just birds that caught my interest. you can record lots of different things. So there's really beautiful soundscapes, the sounds of melting ice, rivers, or even mammals like this beautiful chamois. So this chamois was almost extinct at one point in the Catalan Pyrenees, but there's a reintroduction scheme and they're now quite common. So if you listen here, you can hear the high-pitched squeaks of a marmot, and just past that you'll hear a rather strange croaking sound, like a sheep-like sound, and that's the chamois. So COVID struck and we ended up in total lockdown in Barcelona, an extreme lockdown. So essentially you weren't allowed to leave your house. And if you were to leave the house, you had to have a permission slip, or you had to have a doctor's appointment. Or if you had a dog, you could leave, but only within 150 meters of your apartment. So this was quite tricky, really. I fell back to Knockmig and that kept me entertained, as did my neighbors, as always. So this translates to I'm bored, and I think a lot of us could relate to that at that time. So we got through it, and then our freedom arrived in July. I was thinking back to my old nemesis, the wallcreeper, and I was thinking, well, there's no chance now. It's a difficult species in winter. So imagine when the ice melts and they go back up to the heights of the Pyrenees. But I thought it was time to try the impossible, and what had I to lose? It was a beautiful place, and there were lots of other birds I could record up there anyway. So wallcreeper breeding grounds, this is the holy grail. This is literally mission impossible, especially for someone outside the country who, a foreigner who doesn't really know the land very well. So I was looking at a place called Puigmal. So you're talking about 2,900 meters, 9,500 feet, which is pretty up there, pretty high up there. I thought I'd give it a go, especially when I heard some whispers and, I got some hints as to where they might be. It seemed like nobody really knew where you could find them in the summer. So this was a needle in a haystack for sure. So this is quite high up. Essentially anywhere you can see sheer cliff faces like this, there could be a wallcreeper, but they're in low densities, so it's a tough mission. And these are the kind of paths that you're walking across here, and you're crossing scree slopes as well. So like a wrong move there and you're sliding quite a distance and pretty quickly too. So I was honestly quite nervous doing this, but I thought it was worth it, and it was really interesting. And as always, I had some companions along the way. You may or may not know this one. This is a black redstart. So this is a scarce winter visitor to Ireland. We have occasional birds, especially on the coast, but it's very rare to hear them in Ireland. So this is the song of the species. A marmot in the background. So from the black redstart over to the melancholic sound of the beautiful rock thrush. So this was actually the first time I'd heard that species, and I was really blown away by the simplicity and almost sadness of this tune. It was really quite fitting for the landscape, I thought. So even though I wasn't seeing wallcreeper and I was in quite a precarious area and it was tough going, I was really enjoying it, and I was getting some really unique recordings, for me at least. But I kept pushing, and I came to the end of the weekend. I was exhausted, dehydrated, limping a little bit, and I thought, okay, I'll take the scenic route back down to the car and I'll try to go down this little scree slope here. Thoughts of wallcreeper were long gone. I was just looking forward to a nice cold bottle of water and getting back to the car to put my feet up before I went home. So I was treading as carefully as I could down the scree slope, and I accidentally hit my recorder and didn't realize that it had been recording for 20 minutes. This is what happened at the very end of that recording. Sorry, you'll have to excuse my French there. But something stopped me in my tracks, something that I really wasn't expecting. Literally, I'm talking about 10 to 12 feet in front of me, there was movement on the ground. I have my parabola in one hand, my binoculars lifted in my other hand. This is what I saw. A male wall creeper. Couldn't believe it. So after months and months of trying, I finally connected in the most unlikely of places, up in the breeding grounds. So I pulled up my parabola as gently as I could, went to press record, realized it was already recording, so stopped it and started it again in the hope that it might call or sing or do something. And this is what happened. So what you just heard there is the first ever recording of a wall creeper to come out of Spain or Catalonia. And I was just, I can't describe to you how elated I was and how much my hands were shaking in this moment. And it was just, it was really amazing, honestly. So I just sat there and I spent some time with this bird, and I realized that it had probably almost certainly never seen a human before, because it acted as if I wasn't there. And it came so close, sometimes I almost felt like sitting back. So here it was, feeding in the crevices, picking out little spiders from the rocks in front of me, so close that you could even see the groove down the center of the bill of this bird. And sometimes it would peep its head out at me and look at me like this quite curiously, and then walk down and almost, pass by my knee as I sat there. So soon after, we decided it was time to come home. And after all of the excitement in Catalunya, it was a completely different change, and I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know how I was going to continue my sound recording journey. So I thought about it, and I realized that there are very few Irish recordings. There are some recorders out there now, and the collection is building. But I thought that this would be an opportunity to apply everything that I've learned and apply my passion back home, and that's what I did. So I had a new purpose, new targets, lots of exciting Irish species, which we don't have in Catalonia, and Irish Wildlife Sounds was born. So this is the start of the Irish chapter. So what was the game plan? What is the game plan? My first goal is to record all resident, wintering, migrant, and regular vagrant species in Ireland. So I'm literally starting from the beginning, or I did start from the beginning last January. So the idea is to make all of these recordings available to the public through Twitter, Xenocanto. So Xenocanto is an online database for bird sounds. So if you Google Xenocanto, you'll find this website. And if you want to learn bird sounds, I highly recommend that. So it has everything on there. Also, I created a new website to incorporate everything. So to tie in my own sounds and to share as much content as I could. So let's have a look at some of the techniques which I'm deploying here now. So I essentially built these up through trial and error over the last 2 years. So the most fundamental form of recording is active recording. So this is essentially just handheld recording. So here I have my trusty Dodatronic in hand and my buddy Toby next to me, who really isn't a good birding companion because he likes to flush the birds. So the LS12, as before, is connected to the Dodatronic. And a little bit about this Dodatronic. It produces a really clean, crisp sound, as I'm sure you've heard from the recordings previously. It applies a lot of amplification, so it can really pull out a bird sound from a distant bird or really pull out the details of a close bird. And it's also half the cost of other parabolas of its kind and just as effective. The other form is passive recording. So passive recording is essentially the opposite. So for this form of recording, the recorder doesn't necessarily have to be present. So here's the Dodatronic once again in the garden, pointing at some bird feeders. So I would let this run for hours on end. And afterwards, at the end of the day, after work, I would take the recorder in and I would process and take the clips that I wanted. The next piece is the audio mat. So this is an amazing piece of kit. It's about the size of a matchbox. literally. So what you can do with this is you can program it, you can tell it when to turn on, when to turn off in terms of the time and the date. So if you set this up, wrap it in some waterproof, what I actually use is a Ziploc bag for this one, put it out there, put it in a strategic location, somewhere where you'd expect a bird to sing or expect a migrant to pass over, and this will just keep recording for the predefined period. So for this example here, I have it out in the countryside. You can hardly see it. So it's wrapped in a Ziploc bag. I have it taped around this branch, and I've just a little bit of moss placed over the top. So none of this really affects the sound because these Ziploc bags are incredibly sound transparent. So you can also, with the new version of the AudioMot, you can actually attach an external microphone. So that's a little bit of a step up from the small inbuilt microphone of the AudioMot, if you want to spend a little bit extra. So for this AudioMot here, you're talking about, I'd say around €80. And for this microphone here, you can get them for about €30. So it's really not expensive. So this is a little MacGyver job that I've set up recently with an AudioMot. The AudioMot is inside here. It's just inside an electrical junction box, and you have the microphone here. And what you can't see is there's a plastic bag wrapped around that microphone underneath this wind foam cap. Then, if you want to record autonomously for longer periods of time, and you want something a little bit more durable, you can get this SM4 Mini. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about these now, because I actually have 2 of these deployed in the country running permanently. So this is it with its wind gear on. Right, so let's look at the progress so far. So far this year, I've recorded 144 species. I have a few more, but I don't include distant birds or birds that are badly affected by wind sound. So these are 144 species that I'm happy with and I'm willing to keep and move on to the next with. So there's several unexpected species. I'm after learning so much, and I realize there's so much to learn, really a lot. So let's have a look at some of the first Irish recordings. So this location right here is my local nature reserve in Cove. So it's Coskenny Nature Reserve. I had an actual specific target here. That target was kingfisher. So I put this device out there and I left it there for several nights. And I was successful, thankfully. So the beauty of this autonomous recording is the fact that you don't even have to be there. You know, you can be at home resting, you can be in bed, you can be asleep, and this machine is doing the work for you. And the birds don't know it's there, so they act really natural and often come extremely close. But that same night, I had my first mystery, and my first of many mysteries in this project. So let's take a listen to this and let's see if you can guess what it is. Just to give you a little clue, I'll show you the sonogram. So this really had me scratching my head for quite a while, but after a little bit of research, it clicked. Any suggestions?
Gustavo suggests otter.
Yeah, exactly. He was faster than me. It took me quite a while to pick up on that one. So after a little bit of research, I found that this is actually referred to as mewing. So they use mewing when there's another conspecific a little bit too close for comfort, and they're almost like warning it off. So straight away I was learning. Okay, so it was a little bit different to Catalunya. It was a bit of a shock to the system at first with the weather and everything. So it took me a while to thaw out. There are less birds here, and I was thinking at some point, standing on the mountaintops, what have I done? I missed the warm temperatures of Catalunya. But I decided to adapt and refocus and remember that Ireland is an absolutely beautiful place with an amazing array of species. So I went back to basics and decided to listen and learn even with the most simple of species. I got a new job And this meant that I was in the field 5 days a week. So it gave me a great opportunity to sound record as I went. So what I would often do if I was doing bird surveys is I would have my parabola just running autonomously on the tripod next to me, so I wouldn't have to tamper with it while I did my survey work. And I focus on the bread and butter birds. So by this, I mean the staple birds that we take for granted. And well, I know I did. My first example of this is the rook. So in Catalunya, there are no rooks, and I often miss them, even though they're, you know, seen by some as a scavenging, plain, black-looking bird. But in actual fact, if you listen to them, they have quite an intricate, beautiful little song. So here's an example of that. So all of those little clicks and high-pitched jumps are, for me, they're really nice. They're subtle, but they're nice. All right, so new discoveries. Soon I started to realize the more you listen, the less you know. And this is really true. So, you know, I've always had an interest in bird sound, and I've been relatively comfortable. But when I started really listening and recording, it made me realize how much there really is to learn out there. I'll give you an example. It was in the middle of winter. I was doing a survey and I heard this sound coming from the bush. Sorry, I should say it was actually March, so not the middle of winter. We're starting to come into spring here. So this is what I heard. So I really did not know what this was. I was scratching my head. Any ideas?
Victor suggests, let's say, a swallow. John suggesting starling, and Niall Keogh is suggesting redwing. Yeah,
it was a redwing, and this was the first time I'd ever heard that species singing. I mean, presumably they sing frequently, but I never heard it before. So just to finally confirm this, when I walked up to the bush, this is the typical call. So that was the same bird calling as I approached. So this is the redwing here. So redwing right now is one to really listen out for, because they're coming in force at nighttime. So especially on a calm night with dense cloud cover, they fly a little bit lower and they call a little bit more because of the fact that they're slightly disorientated with the cloud. So if you see conditions like that, step outside and you'll be sure to hear them. I'll play it one more time. A really distinctive zeet. So yeah, it's a really nice sound. So spring has sprung. I'm after moving here now up to the Wexford and Wicklow coastline. The days are longer, there's new birds arriving, and as a result, there's more to record. My database is climbing rapidly, and I'm really having a lot of fun. So the first chiff chaffs start to arrive, and these are the heralds of the spring for me. And they sound like this. So they actually sing their name, chiff chaff, and each individual sings it a little bit differently, to the point where you can actually follow individuals that have individual patterns. It's almost like a fingerprint in a way. So the Wicklow and Wexford coast, and I was really happy to be here. So I was working here 1 week a month. Excellent birding locations, and of course, lots of migrants. Better weather, slightly better weather than Cork, it being on the East Coast. And another surprise. So one morning I was arriving early to do my bird survey, and I heard an immediately recognizable sound coming from the hedgerow, and I was really surprised and really happy to hear this. Even better to have my parabola next to me and record this. So this was a migrant moving through. Any ideas? Any takers for this one?
So Stephen McAvoy suggests lesser white-throat.
Exactly, yeah. So it's a lesser white-throat. So I was really happy with this and really surprised. And the bird actually showed really well. So this is the actual individual that you just heard calling. And I'll just quickly compare this to a common white-throat here. Okay, so basically lesser white-throat is slightly smaller. The legs are typically dark and the bill is typically dark. This contrasts to the paler legs and bill of a common white-throat. So lesser white-throat lacks the really distinctive eye-ring of a common white-throat. It typically has a darker hooded appearance. It isn't so apparent in this shot. And the breast is typically much whiter compared to a common white-throat. And just to compare, here's the song of a common white-throat in the same area. And the lesser white-throat once again. Oop, 1 second. Yeah, so the lesser white-throat is a very predictable rattling sound, whereas the common white-throat is much more erratic, I suppose, really. So it was off to a good start. After this, I was asking around for some good locations, and a few local friends of mine, Cian Cardiff, Stephen King and Niall Keogh, gave me some really good advice on some good locations to go birding. And the first one of these was Cahors. So this is a really nice marsh in County Wexford. It has a nice mixture of habitats, so it's wetland, reed bed, dunes, scrub. And on migration, there's a lot of birds stop over here to feed up. Also, there's a wide array of breeding species. So it has everything really, and it's really quite a quiet location. There are a few scattered wind turbines, but in terms of sound recording, if you go there on a quiet, not a quiet day, sorry, a windless day, the turbines don't move, so it's brilliant. Okay, so what I would do is after my surveys at work, I would pop across here and I would record everything that I could come across. So the first one you'll surely know. So let's see if you can get this one. So any guesses for that?
I think that both John and Victor have got it. It's grasshopper warbler, they say.
Yeah, exactly. So it's aptly named because it sounds quite grasshopper-like, really. So this species starts to sing typically at dusk, and it sings right through the night. So this bird was singing just around this area at the time this photo was taken. So as you can see, the sun is going down. So I was really happy to get this one. It was a big target of mine, really. And I also enjoyed really close listens to these reed warblers that were in the reeds nearby. So I was quite relaxed. I was going for a walk until I rounded this corner right here. So as I was going along, I heard a very familiar call, but my heart started to race, and I couldn't remember why, but what it actually was a yellow wagtail. So it's a scarce passage migrant in Ireland, but annual. So I was really happy to get this, and the bird actually landed on a telegraph pole above my head, so I couldn't really make it out very well. So I pulled out my recorder and I started to record, and this is what I heard as it flew away. So I was really happy with this. And then I saw it land and I realized that I had a black head, and I started to tremble a little bit because of the fact that this bird on the right here is a flavissima. So this is the expected subspecies in Ireland. So this is the subspecies which breeds in the UK. And this one here, after a little bit of detective work, I found out was an intergrade subspecies known as supercilialis, and it comes from much, much further east. And this was in fact the first record of this intergrade subspecies in Ireland. So just to confirm its identity even further, I had to get a clear recording, which I did, so I could rule out some rarer options such as Feldig. So I was really happy with that. So now we're going to look at the Irish knockmig stations. So you heard the knockmig station that I had set up in Barcelona. Now we're going to look at the Irish equivalents. So the idea of these is to monitor nocturnal migration in Ireland using autonomous devices. So you've already seen these. You've got the SM4 here on the left, and you've got the two audiomots. So what I do with these audiomots is I use them to test out a site for short periods before I put the big gun in. So I use these to test out a few locations. And what I did is I set them to record from dusk to dawn. And when I did eventually put out the SM4, it would survive for 6 weeks before I had to change the batteries in the cards. So I put two devices out at well-known migration points. One at Mizenhead in the extreme southwest of Ireland, and the other one on Tory Island in the extreme northwest of Ireland. So as we speak, these devices are there and recording right now. And they have been since around July. And the wealth of data that I'm picking up from these things is absolutely mind-blowing. So this is just a photograph of my device when I went for a recent visit to Tory Island just to change out the batteries. So these are lithium-ion batteries. So this is actually a clip-on extension to this device. And this is what gives it the extra battery life. So this will go for 6 weeks minimum. So what you see here, these two gray fluffy parts are the wind covers, and they're really essential in these exposed areas. So as I said, these studies are ongoing, and the final collection for these will be in mid-November. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to take a short break, because this is like a second job to me, in that once I finish work, I'm literally analyzing this for hours and hours until I fall asleep at night. But it's worth it. So in January the 1st, I'm going to recommence after a little break and a little catch up and an update of the website. I'm going to have an improved technique because I've learned through trial and error as I've gone. And I'm going to have a few new locations. So this is Tory Island. This is just a sneak preview of what's been happening so far. And I think you'll agree that the numbers are really quite astounding. So this device has been in position for, I think it's about 2.5 months out there. Or a little bit longer than that. So the most common species there was snipe. So snipe is a breeding species on the island, but looking at the trend, you can see a massive arrival of birds in September, which are clearly birds coming in off the sea. So from Scandinavia or somewhere further north, maybe Iceland, and they're calling repeatedly. So what I ended up with was 1,485 calls. Now I did count these calls one by one, and I noted the time of each call. So you'll understand how this is quite a time-consuming process, depending on how much detail you want to get from it. So again, ring plover. As far as I know, this doesn't breed on the island, but it was quite a common arrival. 2,138 calls. And then there's the likes of golden plover, which certainly doesn't breed. So as you can see, there's a slightly later arrival date for the first bird here. And the 5th of October was the most recent one. But I have yet to analyze from the 10th onwards. So there's probably going to be quite a lot of these. So just to give you an idea of the sound of these birds arriving. So this bird is literally coming in off the sea, and it's seeing land for the first time in several hours as it's battled through the winds and rain. And it's almost calling in triumph as it comes through. So you can actually hear it coming in the distance and approaching and passing over the microphone. And I was really impressed to hear this bird, to be honest with you, because this was an extremely bad night. So it was probably a bird that made a bad decision and got caught out and luckily made it across. Also, you often, at this location, particularly on relatively calm nights with a little bit of precipitation, you get huge arrivals of birds. So this is an example of such an arrival. So it's a really big flock of turnstone. And again, they're coming straight in off the sea and passing over the microphone. So yeah, so these are the top 10 most common species that I've recorded. This study is ongoing. When I finish this, I'll release the full results in the form of a paper, hopefully. But here are a few more highlights from this recorder. So you've got barnacle goose here. So this was from the 29th of the 9th. Again, it's about 5 in the morning. So this is fresh in. You've got a petrel sandpiper here. I don't know how well you can hear this one because it's mixed in with several birds, I think. Yeah. So what you're listening for here is there's kind of a strange rattling sound in between the sounds of metapipits arriving in off the sea. So this is a petrel sandpiper. It's a rare but annual vagrant, and it breeds in North America and Siberia. So this was a really nice record for me. I was happy with it. And a big one for this project, one of the main reasons I wanted to record it here was pink-footed goose. So luckily this bird flew right over the microphone. And again, I was surprised at the conditions it was moving in, but see, a lot of birds don't like to move in heavy winds, but there's always the exception. So the next project was located at Mizen Head. So this is the extreme southwest of Ireland. My first deployment here was my very first deployment of all, before Tory Island even. And my understanding was that if I put a recorder out on the lighthouse, birds would be attracted down low and over the lights at nighttime. So that was the plan. I placed it out right at the tip. I got permission, thanks to Chris O'Sullivan. And it was really quiet, not quiet in terms of wind, but in terms of the number of birds, and the wind noise was extreme. However, there were still some surprises. So this flew past and called at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Does anybody know what that is?
Any guesses? John says cormorant.
No, it is a seabird though.
Stephen McAvoy says storm petrel.
No.
Niall Keogh says Manxie.
Yeah, so it's a Manx shearwater. So this isn't something I was really expecting. So this is a species that breeds in burrows, and as far as I know, there aren't any colonies known in Cork, at least not any large colonies. I think they're just an occasional sporadic breeder, or at least they haven't been discovered. So you know, this things like this might point to the fact that, you know, they are out there, because I recorded this species almost every night, sometimes in deafening quantities. So maybe they are out there close by in one of the offshore islands. So after some time, I decided to move. The wind was too much, and as much as I love hearing Manx shearwaters, I needed some diversity. I needed something more from this project. So it was time to look for a new location. So originally I had it here. This is the lighthouse. This is where you just heard the Manx shearwater. And what I needed to do was find somewhere more sheltered, but a location which would also funnel migrating birds. So what I did was I moved it into the estuary here. So this is Lissa Griffin. And I thought to myself, if I move it here and there isn't a lot of migration at night, at least I'll still get nice recordings of the birds that are feeding there, moving around at night anyway. So this is what I did. And I did a quick test, and I realized it was sheltered and there were absolutely lots of birds. So here's a closer look. So you've got a wide range of habitats here. You've got the beach here, you've got some sand dunes, you've got a muddy portion of the estuary, and you've got some really nice marshy shoreline here. So it attracts a wide variety of waterfowl. So you've got ducks, you've got waders, you've got herons, gulls, and it is Mizen Head. So there are always going to be birds flying over because of the fact that it's a southwesterly headland, and you've got the lighthouse just a little bit further out the tip. It surely draws birds in. So my initial deployment was 1 week. So I actually started out with the AudioMot. So that's the little matchbox size device, just to test this out before I put out the big piece. And the results were extremely impressive. Immediately, there was a spanner in the works, not in a bad sense. I saw this interesting shape on the sonogram. I think it was the first or even the second night of deployment. So I'll play this for you here. I'll play it once more. Had me scratching my head. It sounded a little bit familiar, but I didn't really know what it was. So this was at July the 2nd at 4:42 a.m. So this is a nocturnal recording. So no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't find a logical match. I couldn't find anything. But the sonogram was distinctive, so I knew the answer was there. Okay, so it's like a Nike tick, and you've got two little vertical bands either side. So it's at about 3 to 3.5 K. So I thought it was a little bit reminiscent of spotted redshank. And spotted redshank, it's a regular occurring bird in small numbers. So it's a scarce wintering species and a scarce passage species. So I thought maybe it might be that. And I listened. Similar, but there were some differences. And I couldn't think. And then suddenly it clicked with me. So this clearly wasn't a match for any European species, I thought. And what clicked was the fact that spotted redshank sounds quite similar to an extremely rare vagrant that occasionally occurs in the UK and Ireland, called a semi-palmated plover. And I thought to myself, it can't be, because there's only, I think, is it 6 accepted records? So I thought this is an excellent match for a semi-palmated plover, but this is a bold shout, because not only have I not seen the bird, I haven't heard the bird. So I'm going to have to be very careful about what I do with this. So a little bit of context for this species. It's actually the North American equivalent of the closely related ringed plover. So this species breeds in Ireland, and in terms of the visuals, they look quite similar. There are ways to separate them. There's a number of features, but you know, at first glance, they look identical. So there are 6 accepted records. These come from Donegal, Mayo, Galway, and Wexford. Right, so what I did next was this. I made this conglomeration of 3 sounds. So the first one here is the Mizen Head bird. This second one here is an actual semi-palmated plover from Florida. And here you've got a spotted redshank. So the first thing to see is the sonogram. It's identical. So you've got the night tick, and you've got the same vertical bands. This bird is a little bit closer than my bird, but all the features are still there. Now you look at a spotted red shank, you have to come lower down. Okay, so it dips right down almost 2K, which a semi-palmetto plover never does. So this was the first telltale sign. And now listen to them side by side and the answer is there. So just to recap, there's the bird from Mizzen Head, the mystery bird, a semi-palmetto plover recorded in Florida, and a spotted red shank. Okay, so just one more time. So as incredible as this story was turning out to be, this wasn't the end of it. I actually recorded this bird again. So on the 29th of July, the 31st of July, and the 2nd of August. And amazingly, on the 1st of October, this bird was finally found in the flesh on Mizzen Head. So I was a little bit worried about what people might think about my bold claim, but this really, I felt really relieved when it was found. So I recorded it here, and it was found about 2.5 kilometers to the southeast, so a very short flight in a place called Galley Cove. So I think this is a unique scenario, the fact that such a rarity was detected by microphone and then verified by eye. So yeah, it was a really good start to this recording project. So this photograph is courtesy of Brian McCloskey. So you've got two species here. The bird in the front is the semi-palmetted plover, and a bird in the back is actually a ring plover. So I don't know if you can make this out here, but one of the features that you look for in these birds is the fact that this white gape comes just over the top of the bill, and it doesn't happen in ring plover usually. It's a little bit smaller, and it has these palmations, so that's why it's called semi-palmetted plover. But for me, I think the sound is the most distinctive. So just to recap, here you've got the semi-palmetted plover, and then you've got the European cousin, the ring plover. So it's quite similar in a sense, but it's lower pitched, and it's also quite a lot more forceful. So apart from that, here are some other highlights from the Mizzen Head project. The most common species by far is curlew. Then you've got green shank, which is also really common there. Another, not quite the rarity as the semi-palmetted plover, but quite a scarce species. I guess in a good year you might have 15 or so records of this. It's a wood sandpiper, and this was one of two on this project. And this one here is a little egret, which was a nice one for me because I didn't expect to have it calling at nighttime. Actually, this one is just coming up to sunrise. So just like the Tory project, this Mizzen project is very much ongoing, and I hope to have the results, preliminary results from the first year sometime at the end of the month. Now, before I wrap things up, I'd like to quickly show you the process of picking up these birds and how I visualize them, and how I see them on the sonogram, and how I record them. So this is actually a typical file from Mizzen Head. I haven't actually analyzed this recording yet, so let's have a look. I'll go back here a little bit. Okay, so what happens is the recordings are split into 1 hour sections, and I open each 1 hour section and I can find out the time and everything. So what I do is I zoom in so that there's usually about 14 seconds in view at any one time. So I don't need to listen to this. What you do is you train your eye and you eventually learn the shapes of the sonograms of the birds. And you click here, you hold, and you start scrolling. So here's a curlew, a bit distant. Another one a little bit closer. So what I'm doing is I have to count all of these. So I'm counting as I go along. I have a little counter and I tot things up. So this here vertical bar is either a snipe, I think it's a snipe, or it'll be a female teal. Okay, so it's a snipe. And coming up here, you've got another curlew. You've got a dunlin coming in here. So this is how it works. I scroll through, I analyze everything, and I make notes and I log everything. So this is a little flock of dunlin coming in. So for a typical night, which would be about 10 hours, I can process everything in 1 hour. So here's another snipe coming across. So what I do then, this is a snipe here. I want to record this. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say I have 5 calls here. I'll open up an Excel file. I'll put my date down. So let's say it's the 2nd of the 11th, 2021. My site, Lisa Griffin, snipe, number of individuals, 1. Sometimes I don't fill this in because it's impossible. I think the most reliable feature is the number of calls. So let's say we've got 5 calls here, and I have a little piece here to calculate my time. So this segment was recorded at 5:31, and it was, let's say, 20 minutes into that recording. And it calculates my time. So this bird flew over, 1 bird, 5 calls at 5:51. So that's how it works. And that's the essence of it, really. 1 second. Okay. Okay, so what does the future hold? So Lisa Griffin is going to continue indefinitely, starting from January the 1st for a full calendar year, because I want to know what's happening in the winter as well. I'm going to work on missing species. The first on my list this winter is purple sandpiper. So it looks like I'll be going to the East Coast soon. And also, I'm really adamant on setting up a permanent recording station on the East Coast this coming spring. So that's it. Thanks for holding out. And if you have any questions, fire away.
Thanks very much indeed, Sean. That was absolutely fantastic. I really loved it, and it just shows you what must be out there that we're missing, and just shows you how powerful this is. And yeah, really enjoyed your description of the journey there as well. And yeah, lots of people commenting the same in the chat there at the moment. So we can open up the floor. If anyone has any questions at all for Sean, you can type them into the chat there. So there's a couple I'll go back on now that have already been posted, or you can use the raise your hand facility and the reactions button that's at the bottom, or indeed you can just unmute yourself and ask a question if you'd like. Just one that I meant to go back to there that I saw. It was from from John. Back when you were showing the picture of on the recording of the chamois, he was wondering what distance you were from the chamois at the time he made that recording.
Okay. Yeah. So they really keep their distance. They're quite, they're quite wary of people, because the reason that they were nearly wiped out is because they were hunted for their fur up there, and it seems like they still kind of carry that cautiousness with them. But I was quite lucky with this one, and I reckon I was about I'd say 30 feet, I suppose.
30 feet. That's
yeah, more or less.
That's great.
But it didn't, like, I came around the corner and it was there, and it didn't really hang around that long. They don't really like to stay too close to people.
I just see there, Niall Keogh has commented, he liked the flamingo sound in particular, and he's saying that Birdwatch Ireland's East Coast Nature Reserve could be a good East Coast site. It's excellent for overhead migration in the autumn. that might be certainly one that
Oh yeah.
I might have to think about.
Yeah, I definitely consider it. I'm really excited to set something up there, because I've done a few exploratory nights there, and I'm starting to realize that there's probably a serious flyway running down the east coast in terms of Irish migration, more so than elsewhere in the country. Because, like, just take for example, Paul Kelly. I don't know if you know him. He's a quite a well-known birder from down that way, and he's also doing quite a bit of knockmeg. And the tree pipit, which I recorded over my apartment in Barcelona, quite a scarce species here. He's recorded, I think, up to 9 over his house in Meath. And just the other day myself, when I was surveying in Wexford, I was close to Tara Hill, and there was absolutely spectacular visible migration of finches all morning, including, there was a brambling in with them, several redwing, hundreds, if not thousands, of siskin and redpoll going south. So there's definitely something that needs to be looked into and explored on the east coast for sure.
Yes, in that vein, I see that that Victor is suggesting Hove Head as another possible location. I think that makes absolute sense.
Absolutely,
well.
yeah, definitely.
That's great. So I see. Let me see a couple of questions here. So John is asking, do you think that sound recordings will shake up environmental impact surveys and so on?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I'm already thinking about it, because I mean, for the likes of turbines, there's so much emphasis on the birds that pass through during the daytime, and what about what's happening at nighttime? These turbines do move at night sometimes, so I think we really need to consider it. It's a serious thought. Like, I'll give you an example. Recently, I lived in Mallow, so that's inland Cork, and my location there. Let's say we wanted to put some turbines in the field behind me. There was very little happening, nothing. The occasional buzzard. At nighttime, you could be talking 50 plus golden plover. It's an Annex 1 protected species passing over. So, we really need to consider it for sure.
Gustavo is asking there, he said fantastic talk, which I would certainly echo, and he's wondering, is there any starter set that you recommend for people who want to get into this?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on what kind of aspect you're most interested in. I'll give you a little breakdown. If you want to record by hand and you're interested in recording during the daytime, I would just start out with a little handheld. So the Olympus LS12, which I have, it's not actually sold anymore, but the next best alternative is a thing called the Zoom H4n Pro. You can pick these up secondhand, I think, and you can get them for about 150, 200 secondhand. But the most important thing to consider when you're getting these is to put a wind cat or a dead cat on it, so a wind stopper, because in Ireland, without that, your recordings will just be absolutely destroyed. But anyway, with this, you can use it for knockmeg at night if you protect it with a bit of cling film, and you can also record by hand. If you're just interested in exploratory recording and you want to record nocturnal migrants, then the audio mot is something that's definitely worth considering, because they're extremely cheap. You'll pick them up for about 80 euro, and they do all the work for you. Unfortunately, you can't record actively with those. It's just passive recording. But if you have any more specific recording needs or anything you want to ask me, just let me know.
As it happens, as you're saying that, Sean, I have a H4n Pro on my desk right now.
So
camera. It's a great recorder. It's actually what Ricky Whelan and I used to record the Birdwatch Ireland In Your Nature podcasts as well. So it's great for vocal work too. So there we go.
Yeah, they're brilliant.
There's a question there from Stephen McAvoy. He's wondering, is there any work on using AIs or software or anything to cut down on time in analyzing recordings?
Yeah, there is actually. I'm not sure of the details of this, but I know that there's several projects in the pipeline. I think that one of the big American universities is preparing something. I mean, there's already a few similar products. I suppose, I don't know if you're familiar with a thing called Shazam. So this is an automated app that you use for music. So for example, if you hear a song that you recognize and you want to know the name of it, but you can't remember, you play Shazam and it'll process it and it'll tell you the name of the song. So there are some apps like that already for bird sounds. So it's just a matter of, changing the format of that to feed in, longer periods of recordings. But yeah, I do think there's something coming, and I don't know how I'm going to feel about that, because I like the excitement and the, the manual scrolling. But it's going to be an absolutely fantastic tool for science, so we can't knock it either way.
Just on that, I have a friend who works in Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology in the Macaulay Library of Natural Sounds there, and they have this software called Raven they use to analyze these things. And I know there's a guy who sort of pioneered this guy called Bill Evans. And he did. I remember during my time in Cornell, what he actually did was he was using hot air balloons and putting recording equipment into hot air balloons, putting it up in the sky.
Was he?
And he got loads of really good recordings of particularly of nocturnal migrating thrushes and warblers, and then they'd run these through software and they'd identify everything overnight.
You're starting to give me some ideas now, Niall.
There you go.
Does Birdwatch Ireland have a hot air balloon I can borrow?
We're working on it. Maybe we can repurpose our marquee or something. There's certainly a lot of hot air in Birdwatch Ireland. Just a comment there from Paul Lynch saying the Olympus LS-P4 is another good starter option.
Okay, brilliant.
And we have there, Emma has just commented, she's wondering, have you been able to record sand martin? She's suggesting the sand martins at Shangana Cliffs in South Dublin, just near Shankill there. Another East Coast site that'd be good.
Oh, brilliant, thanks. I have recorded sand martin, but I could definitely do with improving on it, so I'm going to keep that in mind. Thanks very much.
Amy is asking, it's a very good question. When you're looking for birds, would you sometimes play bird songs to make them come closer?
No, I don't like to do that, because it's unnatural and it stresses them out. So I like to let them do their own thing. Also, if you were to do that, the sounds that they're going to produce are going to be unnatural. They're going to be alarm calls in response to unnatural behavior and potentially stress-inducing behavior. So no, I don't like to do that. No.
Yeah, and just to say, of course, during the breeding season, that could be very disruptive and would potentially actually be a breach of the law to do something like that.
Yeah.
So that's very important to note. I'll just check I haven't missed any questions. Anyone else? Anything you'd like to ask Sean while we have him here?
Hi, Sean. This is Andrew Burke here. Got a question in two parts for you. So first of all, obviously accumulated a significant amount of data out there doing all this. I suppose, how might that be used potentially in an Irish context, a European context, or a worldwide context? And secondly, I was wondering if you'd considered sort of looking perhaps for sponsorship, either through academia or through sort of environmental-minded organisations, perhaps you out a little bit and provide you with a bit of funding.
Yeah, no, I actually have done that, and I've been successful, thankfully. Let me go back. I'll just show you my first page. For some reason, my computer's after slowing up now. I think it's because of the video, but look, I can just explain. So the sound recorder, which is out on Tory Island, is done through a grant from the Heritage Council. So this is in joint collaboration with the new Innistrothal Bird Observatory in Donegal. So then also the sound recorder on Mizzen Head is partly funded by the Sound Approach. So they're the UK-based organisation. So I work with them a little bit in that they're looking for various like knock-mig calls. So I send them across when they need them. And actually, Dotatronic, the parabola, ended up sponsoring me also because of the amount that I was posting and everything. And so I don't spend a lot of money on the devices, thankfully. And in terms of the data, it's mind-boggling, really, the amount of data that's coming out of it. And I'm still in the kind of phase of figuring out how exactly I'm going to approach this. And that's why I want to take a break in November, because it's really full on. But my plan is to do repeat studies over a number of years. And then I can really start to look at trends of birds, when they're arriving, when they're leaving, what kind of numbers are moving at night. And with weather as well, I can also see how this affects their movements. So that's the general gist, that's the general plan. But it's very much an evolving process at the moment.
Just to say congratulations and good luck.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks for the question there, Andrew. I see that Victor has his hand up as well. So over to you, Victor. I see you put the question in there, and then
Yeah,
go
put
ahead.
the question.
Oh yeah.
That's okay. That's all the same. Sean, thanks for a fantastic talk.
Oh,
Very
thanks for
entertaining indeed.
Oh, I'm glad.
Great, brilliant, Sean. Actually, very good, very especially when I'm just back from Mizzen. I was there for 2.5 weeks, so I actually heard your sending people over and recorded it. So it was
nice.
It was great. It was brilliant.
I actually haven't seen the bird yet. I need to go and see it.
Oh, well, I've seen it about 20 times. But
God. Yeah.
And I was actually at the Signal Lighthouse as well. So I was actually a bit shocked you didn't get more bird recordings than you said you did.
I was as well, but I think the weather conditions there are just too extreme for birds. I think they're coming straight in over and they're dropping down into the more sheltered. Basically.
Yeah. But anyway, I have 4 quick questions, and you can answer each of them quickly.
Okay.
So for a birder that doesn't really want to go into all these gimmick gotchas and stuff, I have an Apple iPhone 12 Pro. So is there any suggestions or tips or or best ways if I'm just recording a bird? Like basically, I just press the record. I go to the recording settings and put the phone out. But is there any tips on that you can give me?
Yeah, I mean, so some of the microphones that are built into these modern phones are surprisingly good, but the main thing, especially in Ireland, to consider is wind protection. So, like with these phones, even the slightest kind of wisp of a bit of a breeze, that the recording is destroyed. It's so dramatic that the sound of just even a little wisp of wind. So, what I would suggest is you can get these on eBay quite cheap. Is just to get a little wind stop that you pull over. I don't know exactly where the microphone is on the iPhone, but just make sure that it covers that. If you don't want to really invest in that, you can try cling film. It does the job, so long as it's not flapping around. It should help, but it'll never be as good as a wind sock like. But you should pick one of them up quite cheap, maybe about €5-10 on eBay for a phone.
Yeah, very good. Next question for your night, Megan. When do you think the birds call most? Like, is it after dusk or pre-dawn or in the middle? When do they call mostly?
It really depends, Victor. Like, first of all, it depends on the species. Like, for example, let me think of an extreme example. For meadow pipit. So we do know that this bird migrates at night occasionally. I mean, maybe more so. We're still figuring these things out, but typically that will start to call at about an hour before sunrise. Very rarely you get them in the middle of the night. Other species then, like waders, they usually start to appear. Like if I'm recording away from an estuary where there aren't waders already situated, I usually expect them around 11 or 12 o'clock at night time. Typically, but I mean, I'm just surmising really. Hopefully after maybe at the end of this year or after another year, I can give you a more concise answer when I look at the data trends from Mizzen and Tory.
Yeah, great. And an app question. You've mentioned Xeno, and a lot of birders actually still don't realize you can get the app, a free app. I think it's brilliant. I'd pay even if you had to pay for it. It's free. Aves Vox. It's in French. AVES and then VOX. And basically, you probably know about it, but I presume that's the best app. That's got every single recording call.
I've not heard of it. Brilliant.
Yeah, so it's an app. It's free. Aves, AVES, and then Vox, VOX. Every single recorded on the Xeno Zanto is on that.
Brilliant.
So you can just, if you download it for free, you've got it at the tip of your hands, you know. So I was just going to ask you, is there any? I mean, I haven't seen anything better than that because it's got all the Aves Vox recordings on it. I was going to ask if you recommended any other apps.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the go-to is Xeno Canto. I typically go there. For people like say who are unsure of a bird call and then they're really stuck, there are a few apps that you can use. Like if you record a bird, BirdNet is a good example of that. I think that's actually by Cornell University. So I think it's birdnet.org. But if you're if that's not correct, just type in BirdNet into Google and you'll get this. So what you can do with this one is you can take a little clip of a bird that you're unsure of, feed it into the box there, hit enter, and it'll identify the bird for you. You know, sometimes it doesn't get it right. It's kind of more biased towards American species at times, but it'll point you in the right direction if you're really stumped.
Cool. And last question, Sean, thanks again. But just a curious question, when you recorded the Balance Creek up at Groney Marsh.
Oh, yeah.
Because my parents live in a reed bed, near a reed bed in Italy. And often I'm bored, like it's dark and I see water rails flying over and they call them at night. You know, they just go from one part of the reed bed to the other part. What made you think that it was a flyover rather than the bird going from, say, like just moving, flying out of the reed bed and back down again?
Oh yeah, because this call is a typical flight call. So what I heard with this is a more distant call, and then you can hear it coming closer, and that was it. So this recorder was there for a week, and there was nothing more. So it was just a single incident. So
right. Very good.
I mean, it could be the case that it was hanging out in there, and I just happened to get it as it flew out and call, but it's highly unlikely. There was no more. It was just this event. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Okay, Victor, thanks.
Thanks for your questions there, Victor. Those were great. Des Higgins is just in the chat to say that, he says that Abe's box is great for phones, all right. Works for Android too, but only for recent versions, apparently. So bear that in mind. And John Copeland, he's posted very kindly a link to Paul Moore's video of the semi-palmated plover. So people can find that in the chat and click on the link there, the Twitter link, and you can get that video there.
I should have said that. It was actually Paul Moore that found this bird in the flesh. Sorry, Paul. I finally pinned it down.
Yeah, no, it's great that was pinned down. That's wonderful discovery. Okay, just one last chance. Any further questions just before we finish up? Anything else you'd like to ask Sean? Okay, well, listen, thank you very much, Sean, for speaking to us this evening. It was an absolutely fascinating talk. I'm sure that everyone enjoyed it as much as I did, and the comments are there. Everyone's had a great time, really enjoying it. A great turnout tonight as well. And so thank you very much for that. Really appreciate all the time and effort you put into that. And we look forward to following your progress. And also just to say as well that Sean has in recent issues of Wings has written some really fascinating articles in there about some of the bird sound recordings using QR codes, so you can access them directly. So you had great feedback on those. So well worth checking out if you're a Birdwatch Ireland member. If you're not a Birdwatch Ireland member, it's another good reason to join us. You'll get to get those. So please do that. So speaking of Birdwatch Ireland membership, Christmas is not too far away. So if people would please think of giving a gift of Birdwatch Ireland membership to friends and family this Christmas, that would be great. Don't forget the Christmas cards and calendars, and of course the Birdwatch Ireland shop. We have all sorts of products there for Christmas. Wings magazine will be out in the next couple of weeks, and it'll have the Christmas catalogue in there. So that's a great way to support us as well. And just to say as well that if you enjoyed this evening, which I've no doubt you did, we'd really appreciate a donation to Birdwatch Ireland's COVID-19 fundraising appeal. You'll find the details at birdwatchireland.ie. Just to remind you again, just of our meeting this coming Sunday, we're going to Scourries. We're meeting in the Red Island car park on Sunday morning at 11. And the details are at southdublinbirds.com in the events section. And then our next talk will be an in-person indoor talk in the Graduate Pub on Rochester Avenue. That's at 8 p.m. on the 30th of November. So Tuesday, 30th of November. And it's going to be Brian Burke talking about the Irish Garden Bird Survey. So looking forward to that very much. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you have a good evening, and I hope we see some of you on Sunday and more of you.
Sorry, Niall.
Oh yeah, Sean. Yeah, sure.
Could I just say one thing, because I forgot to say? I think I forgot to tell you the address of the website.
Oh yes, yeah, please, absolutely.
Yeah, so if you're interested in following what's going on, you can find the website at www.irishwildlifesounds.com, and from there you can find the Twitter link as well. It's been a little while since I've updated the website because of just the sheer amount of recordings to go through, but it's going to be updated in the coming weeks over the winter. That's great. I'll type that into the chat in case anyone's saving that, so that we can have that. irishwildlifesounds.com. There we go. So that's in the chat if anyone would like to copy that there. And so yes, well, yeah, we're very well remembered there. So listen, thank you very much, everybody, and look forward to seeing you all in person soon. And thanks again, Sean. Really loved that. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Right, everyone. Bye for now.
Right.